So, like as I was saying, like the Hull House was basically helping immigrants assimilate into American society, get them better jobs and stuff. And like this was like see many people were doing. There's also a lot of stuff that were not in the pictures that were happening during this time. Like the Salvation Army, which was one of America's biggest charities, started here, starting during this time, and it was helping many poor people as well. Oh, and like it was basically a lot of philanthropy was happening because of the poor people. And like even though these conditions were often terrible, oh like there's some like there's also new stuff that were invented during this. I wouldn't say invented, but they were created by people during this time. Like whatever days they didn't have of work, like they often had Saturdays and Sundays. This was like the period where Saturdays and Sundays were being were seen as being off of work. Like this was when that traction grew. Like before, like it was open typically it was like skilled workers working like all these jobs that were required to be on business most of the time, and then they just take off whenever they felt like it. But with all these unskilled workers and like all these factory jobs like being overtaken by these monopolists, like all this began to change as they gave like Saturdays and Sundays off, and like they set that as the standard there for workers. And then like they also gave some breaks like during the Christmas holiday and like Easter, like there's breaks for them. And like many of them, they often go out to big friends and stuff. And then like some of them even went on something called a vacation, which was a new concept during this time as well. Well, and like vacation became a little more of a popular thing now than because of like the railroads being expanded so much, like the all it was able to easily access new cities and within hours and stuff. Like people were able to go on this, and like there was often a lot of stuff, and like things were becoming a slightly cheaper because of like how monopolies were coming about, which even though they were still poor, at least some of the stuff is cheap for them. So like that's a good thing for the and like as we get into 1890s, there will be some major events in the 1890s that will define the Gilded Age as it is right now. So 1890s, this is this is basically an era where there's lots of events that accumulate. There's a war, and there's even more of the chaos as we've seen in the 1880s. So in 1890s, Congress finally did a major act to like stop all these trusts and businessmen from overpowering everyone, and like they called it the Sherman Antitrust Act. Though it was in and like you can see this was like the many people in saw Congress as this, like it was like these people, congressmen, and then these trusts, like these monopoly men, like they called it, were over it there, and like they were basically almost controlling them through their thing. So like that was a major political cartoon, and like there was basically and like the sermon was basically, even though the act was like very, it was they gave the language that forbade trust. Like in reality, like they were used by they weren't actually. It was actually it was only written in name. Like they didn't really enforce the act very well. Like trust continued to be there, and it actually gave trust more power because there's a provision in the bill that basically union workers that basically suppress union workers, and like unions were a major part of the society right back then and even now because of like how these more of these trusts were coming in. Like there's unions called the American Federation of Labor there and stuff, and like that was coming out, and basically they were collectively bargaining, trying to get better wages, though they were often suppressed during this era because of how big these people were having over Congress, and like the enforcement against the unions were actually even more prevalent during this time. And like this was an example in the 1894 Pullman strike, which was a major when it was basically a company called railroad company called Pullman in the city of Chicago, and like basically all the workers started to riot, to go on strike, right? Because of like they made they reduced their pay. They reduced their pay, and yet they increased the cost of the living tenants in the in the factory, and like the many people were not able to afford it, so they decided to go on strike. And like Pullman was able to trying to appeal to the federal government. The federal government was only able to legally get in charge of this and like put the strike down only because of like there's like a provision like calling like because like the railroads were supplying mail throughout the country, and like if tampering with the mail is a serious federal crime, so like that was the only reason the federal troops were coming into this. So like that was the only reason why the strike was put down. And then like that was the thing. And then like there's in 1893 there's an economic recession, major one, and it was the worst until the Great Depression in 1921, which I already talked about. 29. So like basically 1893, this was a chaos. Wall Street crashed, and like all these monopolies they were suddenly losing money, and their solution was to just cut wages, workers' wages and stuff, which caused even more economic turmoil. All but like it was able to rebound in a few years afterwards because of like how like it was naturally these big businesses were creating more jobs and stuff, which was creating more wages in the end for them, and like more revenue for companies. So like that was the thing. And like there is still child labor and stuff in the 1890s. Another picture of a child working in the thing. Children were often not going to school. They were just working, and especially immigrant children, because like they needed money. Like they often will give money if child you'll get more money if more workers were working. And like they'll often give women and children workers less because like of how like desperate the workers are to have them work. So like that is something that is another thing that was present during this time. And like there and like another major group that was also like struggling during this time, not these workers and stuff, but also these farmers. Farmers throughout the country were also struggling because of like how prices were falling off for like corn and stuff. And like they wanted a simple solution. Like they wanted, because the US currency back then was pegged to the gold. So like basically whatever the value of gold is, the US dollar would be. And like they wanted to add silver to that to give the dollar more value and stuff that would give them more revenue for like the shortages they're facing for like the crops and stuff. So like that's what the thing. And there's a growing populist movement. It's a third party called the Populist Party that was beginning to emerge. Like they were being successful in some of the elections before 1896. And then like 1896, they combined forces with the Democrat Party, and they nominated a guy named William Jennings Bryan, and which basically advocated for the gold and silver bimetallism and stuff. And like he was also advocating for workers' rights, and like he was against William McKinley. And like the election, it was shown here. This is the 1896 election. And like all the and like you can see where like the each person was winning. So like a lot of the farmer states like here, and then like the southern states which typically favor Democrats, that's always in these elections, went to Williams Bryan. Right? But then McKinley, the Republican, he was winning all these industrial northern states. And like although there seems to be more blue in this map than red, the red of that were holding more population centers like Pennsylvania, New York, like Illinois, Ohio, all these major states that were basically more in population than that, and it was overwhelming. And like in the end, he won a narrow victory. It was 51% for McKinley to 47%. But that was the end of the populist movement and bimetallism in general. And William McKinley was seen as more popular because of how he was able to remember this economic recession in the 1893. He was able to bring the economy back up to his tenure and make it more. And like another thing that was more that was more question about was tariffs in this era. And like McKinley favored high tariffs because he wanted the more American goods to be sold. He want and like tariff benefited the big businesses and stuff, which he thought would be good. But like tariffs also made stuff more costly, which was why it was unfavorable among workers and stuff. And that was another issue in this election. William Jennings Wines wanted less tariffs for this for people, but like he wanted more, McKinley wanted more. So like that was one of the another issue there. And like eventually there's something called the Spanish American War that came in 1898. So like that was the and that would be that's kind of the last topic we'll talk about today. It's like 1898, the Spanish American War occurred. It was basically because of yellow journalism, which was like journalism, but was trying to captivate people's attention and stuff. And like it often exaggerated events. And like there was one such exaggeration, like the USS Maine was exploded off Cuba, which at the time was owned by Spain in during the time. And they immediately people pointed the blame onto Spain, even though like in reality the US it probably was due to like an internal engine thing that was nothing to do with Spain, but like they still used that as an excuse to gain territory. They wanted to expand their territory, and like Spain got some new territory like in Cuba and stuff of that basically what wanted the US wanted to control. So like they went to war with Spain, and like there's all these heroic figures that they were depicting in this war. Like here, the Rough Riders, Theodore Roosevelt, who would become a later president, was leading them, and like he basically took them up against the hill, and they were crushing the Spanish people soldiers below. And like all these wars. There was also a branch of war in the Philippines, which the U.S. won, and then like eventually it ended within a year, and the Spain quickly surrendered, and and the U.S. gave some money in exchange for Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Philippines, which it was expanding from a which the US was expanding from its original thing. So like the US, like Britain and France at the time, were starting to build an imperial empire. And like many of them, like the US, it was a little controversial because many people they it went against the US philosophy of self-determination. Like it was the US that broke against freedom against the UK in over 100 years ago. So like they wanted to justify it by through something called social Darwinism. It's just basically like which basically said that white people are superior to like all these minorities and stuff. And like it was basically and that the US should start educating these minorities to make them better, to make them more Christian and stuff. That was like kind of the justification they were giving. It was often a very racial justification. And like the US, the racism was not going anywhere here. As like African Americans who are already struggling, they faced even worse conditions than white people in factories, and like they were still facing segregation, which now is officially legal according to the Supreme Court. In 1896, there was this case called Plessy v. Ferguson, in which basically Plessy, who actually was only 1/8 the blacks, meaning like he was only that his great only one of his great grandmother was black, and because all his other relatives were white and stuff, and yet he was denied he was segregated from the cart. He was told to sit in a colored section, and he sued. He went to the Supreme Court, and they ruled that segregation could be legal as long as facilities are equal for both people, meaning like white and colored people must have the same facility. Like it has to be same quality and stuff, but it wasn't the same quality in reality, as the colored people faced terrible things, terrible quality. And like afterwards, the southern states ever expanded their use of segregation to justify their acts in this. And like you can see in the another topic, in the frontier was closing, like before in 1860, like in the map before 1860, in 1860, oops, like this is news, this is like these sides. In 1860, like you can see the map here, like you can see all those grays, those were all territories, they were not states, they were sparsely populated during this time. And then you can see this map, there's only a few great territories left, like a lot of them became states now because of like how more expansion was coming and like all that. So like that was basically thing. And now the US is expanding into other countries like Cuba and Puerto Rico and like this stuff. And like the US was basically becoming more of a global empire during this time. It was becoming like the third largest economy in the world, and eventually second largest, I think, by the end of the decade, end of the 1890s. And like the US became the largest producer of steel and a lot of other things. And it was basically where the US was expanding like anything. And like and the US was having higher populations than many European countries now. And like it was now only like it was like fourth or fifth. Only Russia, China, and India had bigger populations than the US during this time, which was showing the US growth overall in this era.
All right, that was a vast and very impressive presentation from you, Achyut. There are a couple of questions very quickly. First question is, if you could see in the 18th century and the predominant growth of the political economy of US, they have always been holding an aversion towards China. Now, as a researcher of this entire historical events of the 18th century with regard to the United States of America, why do you think they were very choosy about China? What was the prominent reason for it?
There's different reasons for today and then back then. And like China, all like the back then, like it was because of like the laborers, like Chinese laborers, they were accepting lower wages compared to white people, which was really late, which was really like causing many anti-Chinese sentiments. And like China was also like the place, like I didn't mention this, but like in the foreign policy, there's something called the Rebellion. Like the US was trying, as it was gaining more influence in the world, they started to gain influence in China as well. And like all this US presence was leading to and China to grow against the US as well through the Boxer Rebellion, which was basically a rebellion against all these immigrants and stuff of that were coming from all this influence from these countries like the US. It was against these. So like that was like the thing then. And then like China with all these corporations, the US and Britain influence and stuff, they were also getting exploiting Chinese workers to be poor, and like eventually it was kind of leading up. And like when workers are poor, it leads to like some major revolution and change during this time. And like China, communism slowly emerged from China. So like it was, which is leading to our today's situation still, because of like the Chinese communist, this China was leading to more authoritarianism in China. I know, which went against the US ideals. So like the US so like the kind of a relationship between the US and China, it's always been back and it always been like not back and forth, or like
Mm.
the US definite, it's always having this animosity to China, mainly because of how like China is just producing, doing something that the US doesn't want, like
Mm.
with the laborers, for example. Like the US with Chinese laborers were getting more popular because they're low, not because they're Chinese, but because they're able to accept lower wages. And like it's there was also and like the US was trying to set influence on China, but China repelled them and they set up a communist influence, and like it was all that. So like
Mm.
it's a little complicated than that, but like it was basically like the US was not like minding China until suddenly China was being a direct threat to themselves. So like that was the thing.
I see. Okay, so having got the expertise of making a presentation about the 19th century of US and 18th century of US now, and you are living in the country, so tell me where US was more dominant. Was it in the 18th century or was it in the 19th century? And we were given to understand that in 18th century had the big stalwarts like Carnegie or Rockefeller we have seen in the presentation. Those people coming and contributing to the nation. They were the godfathers of the industrialization that happened in the United States of America. So having got the analysis of these two reign of the history, which one do you think is more prosperous and more strong as a nation, 18th or 19th century?
First of all, this quick clarification, 18th century, it's not like 1800 to 1899. It's actually like 1701 to 1800. So like that's what they call 18th century. So like
Correct?
what
Yeah,
actually I'm saying is 19th century, which
19th
was
century.
which was 1801 to 1900,
No,
which was the
my frame of reference was not only with the scope of the presentation that you had made, like, including the 1700s and early 1800s of the years, where America was most spoken country in the entire domineering of the globe. So I was asking you to make a bird's eye comparison.
yeah,
In
yeah, I know. I was just fixing a point like the
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
you're
I stand
making like
corrected. Yes, yes. I mean, 18th
19th
century
and 20th.
has got a different one. Yeah.
Yeah, 19th and 20th century. So I just wanted to tell you that. But anyway, like easily it would be the 20th century, like
Mm,
later. Because like that's the because like 19 it was when it was growing and stuff. And like although like people were still many people were still not be were very poor still in America. It was not like the thing. Like in the late 20th, at least like more people were not poor. There's still wide disparities between rich and poor, though still it's not as bad. And like more
mm,
people have like African Americans have rights, and like workers are now better, a little better off than in the 19th century. And like the US in foreign policy wise overall, it was able to assert control more in a lot
mm,
of these countries, a lot of other countries. And like it was in the 19th century, it was on par with Europe when it came to industrialization. In the
mm,
20th century, it was helping Europe with like
mm.
rebuild its economy after World War II and stuff like that. It was helping Europe provide its defense against the Soviet Union and that. So like it would clearly be the 20th century.
I understand. Okay, right. So you completed 6 months of this training. You joined on 19th June 2022, and today we are at the fag end of the year, and tomorrow being 19th. So it's whole of 6 months of your personality development and leadership class from me. And it encompasses about 25 classes. So, and your presentations were almost about 19 to 20 presentations so far, attending weekly once. Where do you think you have been scaled up after the 6 months of sessions and the vast coverage of science topics, historical topics, technological topics, and the topics chosen by the trainer himself? Where do you think your personality has been scaled up in the 6 months of classes?
Hmm. As you make more, like it's just like more like info like first of all, I was able to be more informational definitely throughout the presentations. Like as I grew, as more time passed, like I was able to insert in more information and stuff, add analogies, and like make the presentation overall flow better or overall. And I'm able to now do way more vaster presentations without
Yeah, yeah.
hesitance. Like in like I was my first presentation was only like 10 minutes or something. Now this is like nearly an hour or something. So like this is like and like I did, and it felt almost the same, which is like good because because like an hour you definitely would feel like like you felt like you slowed down and stuff, but I haven't felt like I really slowed down. So like the pace of the presentation definitely gotten more, and like how to create the presentation also changed. When I first created the presentation slides, so I didn't know how to do it. I mean, like I knew how to make a presentation slide. I just didn't exactly know what would be the right fit. However, like should I include more words? Should I just do all pictures and stuff? Yeah, and I'm still experimenting with it a bit. Like I can do whatever I want, but the presentation aid, it should just be only there to like basically to help you with the presentation. You should like use it with the presentation. Like the pictures I used with the presentation, like the words, like you shouldn't create like entire words and stuff with body paragraphs there. The more visual, visual aid should be used visually and like stuff. And like it shouldn't just be like this, it shouldn't be whatever you're gonna say audibly that will be there. Like you have to also say it, you're gonna say it, like don't repeat it onto it. Like you can you but rather use the visual to help you convey what you're gonna say visually. So like that's another thing that I think improved. And then yeah, the space overall, the presentation quality is also better with these newer topics and stuff, and like it will force you to become more creative, which is another thing that
Okay, all right. So, what's going to be your next week's? I thoroughly enjoyed the presentation. I mean, this evolution of America presentation, all the three chunks, that is the two parts previously and today's presentation. I had a lot of information, and thanks for the learning that you have given to me on that. So, yeah, next week is Christmas Day. So, will you be available first of all? Because normally when I conduct US batch sessions uh, in the year 2021, 2020, people would look for a break or something. So just asking you because next week it's 25th Sunday. So what's your plan?
I don't know yet. I'll be out of town though. I could still make a presentation present. I don't know for sure though. I can definitely tell you before.
Okay. So if we are holding up the presentation, what topic do you have in mind?
Like I can just do a topic you give.
Okay, right. Can I give one topic now? You can
Yeah.
think over it, and even if it is not coming to the same level of the connotation that I have in mind, that's absolutely okay. You see, Achyut, something happens here. Um, I'm a freelancer, and my students are right now in a good position as a subordinate or as an assistant manager, or if they are working as professors in college, they are as associate professors or lecturers, those kind of people. They are basically 25, 26 years old youngsters. It so happened from August 2022 till this December 2022, five of my students who are spread over varied occupations, one guy working in a college, one girl working in a corporate environment. All these people tried to involve my training services to their occupation houses, like for their own companies or colleges or schools or whatever. They get curious, they call me and they say that, sir, whatever you trained us, I want the same thing to be trained to our beneficiaries here. One girl who was working in the organization, she calls up and says that, sir, I want my subordinates to be trained by you. I said, fine, give me the date. And one guy who is working as a professor in a college, and he says, sir, when I was doing my MBA, you trained me in leadership, and I want my students right now to be trained by you. I say, okay, fine, give me the dates. We will work on the plan. Like this, five individuals asked for dates, and they were so close to make this training program happening. But it's so funny. Out of those five, none of the assignments have taken shape until now. It's been 6 months. I mean, sorry, August. It's been 3 or 4 months. none of the assignment came to me. Yes, it's a huge business loss for me, but I am not looking in that regard. You see, these youngsters have got a plan in mind, but they are not able to materialize it. And they are not able to convince the top management, stating that, okay, so this is a guy, and we want him to come and train our beneficiaries, and this is his paycheck, and this is his schedule. Likewise, they are not able to materialize what they have planned. So I want you to do a presentation on how the modern age youngsters can be more practical in terms of materializing the plans that have been put on paper. People plan, people sketch, they strategize, but there is a huge execution gap. They're not able to implement the plan. They're not able to execute what they have planned. They are just not able to give it materialistic or turn it into a reality. So if you call, okay, so you want me to do a presentation on converting the plan into reality? I would say yes. Okay, you want me to do a presentation on better decision making principle? I would say yes. Okay, you want me to make a presentation on, uh, uh, you know, uh, getting the imagination and visualization into a proper form of reality? Because for all these questions, I'm going to say yes, because this kind of touches upon every leadership trait. But if you specifically ask me to zero down on one thing, I would like you to make a presentation on how modern age youngsters can be smart in terms of making plans into reality. What are all the steps they have to take?
Uh,
These youngsters have spoken about they have failed. They might have gone to their bosses. They might have said this plan. The boss would have come across with a kind of a reason, and they would have been convinced with the reason, and they would have stopped the idea. I don't want that to happen. They will have to fight for it. They will have to vouch on the point. They will have to stand for their own selves. How do you think the youngsters can become that mature? That's going to be your presentation theme. Think over it and try to bring one. Do you understand?
yes, sir.
Because the only expectation I have is after your presentation, you have to internalize and way down in the future, when you become a 25, 26-year-old youngster, this presentation should help you out as a wisdom in order to make your plans into reality. So,
All right, sir.
yeah, so that's the storyboard. You come up with your presentation and let's see how far it is matching the expectation. Okay, so it's one of the longest presentations that you have made, and I'm so happy with the kind of that you have done. See you next week, Achyut. I'm very happy with the improvement. And do you have any
Okay.
questions before we finish here?
No questions, sir.
All right. You watch football?
Yeah.
So
The World Cup finals less than an hour.
I was having an assumption. I was telling Mitra that today Achyut is a little bit earlier. Maybe he's smart to reschedule it just because the final is just around the corner. Was it the truth or
Yeah, I want to watch the final.
okay? So
Uh,
whose side is it Messi or is it Mbappe? What do you think?
Massive for me personally, though. Like, whoever I want to win, I'm having bad luck recently. Like, whoever I want to win is actually losing.
Right, right.
Losing, right? Brazil, for example,
Yeah,
lost to
Brazil.
Croatia. Portugal lost to Morocco. Yeah, there's a lot.
Ronaldo had a worst retirement that he could have never ever imagined in his dream, and his
Yeah,
entire
his
glory
sub.
has been put into stake.
He could still do another World Cup, but like he told his World Cup his career's over. His dream
Right,
is over or something
right,
like that.
right. Let's see. Let's see
There's
if Messi
France
is giving us.
Argentina. It's last time it was close. France 4-3. So like this time it will be close.
Yeah, let's see. So he's still playing like a 25-year-old. I'm telling you, Messi. He's so fast. He's so fast, and the way he passes the ball is something incredible.
The
Been watching
Croatia
that.
game, the goals were good.
Correct,
The
correct,
third goal,
absolutely.
like he was going through, like zipping through those defenders. Yes, and he didn't score the goal though. He passed it to
He
the
passed it. That's the point there. That is what is keeping him on the top of the table, because he's not selfish there, and he just wants his friend to score the goal, and he could have even the third goal. I mean, third goal or second goal, I don't know, but he passed it, and that was really smart from his side.
I mean, and yeah, like assists, he still got the assist on him. And like after goals, like the golden boot is decided by the number of assists. So like, and Messi's leading that right now. So like,
I see.
that's the thing. So like at this point, Messi could win the tournament and he could get the golden cup as well, which would be a good ending for him.
Right, right. But he has officially mentioned that he's retiring, right?
Yeah, I think so. It's most likely he'll last. This will be his
Right.
last one.
Right, right. All right, let's see. I don't want to hold you back, so go and enjoy, and we will see you next week.
All right, sir. Bye. Sir.
All right, Achit. Bye, bye, bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.